What happens when a hardworking black father walks into a prestigious school 30 minutes late to a parent-teacher meeting, and walks out with the entire system on edge? He only asked one simple question: so why haven't they said your name once? That moment shattered silence, and triggered a chain of revelations no one saw coming. This isn't just about a school. It's about what happens when excellence is ignored, voices are sidelined, and the right person finally shows up. This story will shake your sense of justice, and remind you why showing up still matters. Don't blink. Don't scroll. Dear viewer, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now, subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published new stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. The fluorescent lights in the Lincoln Preparatory Academy gym buzzed faintly overhead, casting long, sterile shadows on the polished floor. Folding chairs lined up in neat rows made the school's annual teacher-parent conference feel more like a courtroom than a dialogue. Parents, mostly white, dressed in casual elegance, mingled, sipped school-provided coffee, and exchanged pleasantries. At the center of the space stood a makeshift podium, behind which Principal Diane Whitmore adjusted her gold-framed glasses, scanning the room like a hawk overseeing her domain. Among the teachers gathered were Mr. Sheffield, the AP history instructor known for his sharp tongue and sharper bias, Ms. Clark, the literature teacher with a penchant for teaching the classics while rarely acknowledging writers of color, and Coach Graham, who ran the athletics program like an exclusive country club. Missing from their discussions was any mention of one student in particular, Xavier Bryant. Xavier, 15 years old, tall for his age with an angular jaw and sharp eyes that saw more than he let on, was one of the only black students in the advanced track. Quiet but brilliant, his essays in Ms. Clark's class had won 2 regional competitions, yet he was never publicly acknowledged. His artwork was chosen to decorate the school's front lobby, but with no name on it. Every time his name appeared on a list or announcement, it was quickly overshadowed by someone else's praise or removed altogether. Xavier sat quietly in the far corner of the gym, arms folded, dressed in a crisp collared shirt and jeans. He checked his phone again. 7:14 p.m. His father was late. Again. And this wasn't just any meeting. It was the annual showcase, the evening where teachers called out their best and brightest, and recommendations for scholarships, mentorships, and state-level programs were given out. Xavier had a folder of accomplishments that rivaled most of the juniors. But as always, he was alone. Across the gym, Mr. Sheffield smirked toward Ms. Clark. "You know, I find it curious," he said in a tone low enough not to be heard but just loud enough to carry. Xavier Bryant, top of every test, and yet, not a peep from the parents. It's as if his achievements float in without an anchor. Ms. Clark chuckled, brushing a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear. "Some kids can't help where they come from. You can't teach polish. Natural talent fades without discipline." Xavier didn't flinch, but his jaw tightened. He heard them. He always heard them. His father, Malcolm Bryant, 48, worked as a master fabricator at a precision metals workshop downtown. His hands could turn raw steel into architectural beauty, but his hours were brutal, the kind that left your body aching and your schedule broken. Xavier had stopped inviting him to events after years of excuses. But tonight, his father had promised. "I'll be there, son," he'd said that morning, eyes tired but firm. "I might be late, but I will be there." The gym clock ticked to 7:27 when the side door creaked open. Heads turned, not because someone important walked in, but because of the opposite. Malcolm stepped through, wearing a dark gray work jacket, hands still stained with a hint of soot despite a rushed wash. He scanned the room, his face stern but not aggressive, determined but weathered. The pause in conversation was palpable. Parents glanced, then looked away. Some teachers furrowed their brows. Mr. Sheffield rolled his eyes. "Ah," he muttered. "At last, the phantom shows himself." Malcolm walked toward the sign-in desk, nodded at the staff member behind it, then made a straight line for the back, where Xavier now stood tall, his posture stiff with a mix of pride and nervousness. "You made it," Xavier said quietly. "Told you I would." Before either could say more, the microphone at the podium crackled to life. Principal Whitmore cleared her throat, smile professionally frozen. "Good evening, parents and guardians. Thank you for joining us. Tonight, we spotlight students who have demonstrated excellence, not just academically, but as leaders and contributors to our learning community." She continued with her prepared speech, calling out names. Applause followed each. A scholarship for Julia Marks. A science mentorship for Evan Tilden. A public speaking award for Hayden Clark. All white. All well-connected. Xavier's name didn't come up once. "Excuse me," Malcolm whispered to Xavier, "they said you won the state essay competition, right?" "Yeah," Xavier nodded, voice low. "First place." "And the robotics finals?" "Team lead." "And the mural in the lobby?" "My idea. My design." Malcolm's brow furrowed. "So why haven't they said your name once?" Xavier didn't answer. His eyes stayed forward, shoulders squared, a silence both defensive and habitual. Principal Whitmore finished her announcements and invited parents to mingle with the teachers. As people dispersed, Malcolm stood still, his eyes fixed not on the crowd but on the administrators. Something burned low in his gaze, not rage, but a refusal to shrink. "Let's talk to your teachers," he said calmly. Xavier hesitated. "Dad." "Come on," Malcolm said, voice steady. "You show up every day for them. It's time I show up for you." They approached Mr. Sheffield first, who offered a condescending half-smile. "Ah, Mr. Bryant. Glad you could finally make it. We were beginning to think Xavier's education wasn't a priority." "I work long hours," Malcolm said, shaking his hand firmly, eyes not breaking. "But I see everything my son brings home. He's doing your job better than you realize." "Well," Sheffield chuckled, "he's bright, certainly. But sometimes these students lack structure. Parental reinforcement." Malcolm leaned in slightly. "Is that so?" "We'll see how far he gets," Sheffield added. "The real world's not so forgiving." "No," Malcolm replied. "But it remembers those who earned their place." As they turned away, Principal Whitmore stepped down from the podium and intercepted them. Her face was unreadable. "Mr. Bryant," she asked. "Can I speak with you privately?" "In my office." 5 minutes. Malcolm nodded slowly. Xavier's eyes widened, unsure. "Go ahead, son. I'll be right out." He followed Principal Whitmore through a side hallway as Xavier remained by the wall, hands in his pockets, his stomach twisted with uncertainty. What could she possibly want? She had barely acknowledged him until now. Whatever it wasn't small. And Malcolm Bryant, black father, steelworker, late arrival, was about to be hit with something even he hadn't imagined. The walk to Principal Whitmore's office felt longer than it was. Malcolm followed quietly, his boots thudding against the polished linoleum, leaving faint traces of wear and soot on the otherwise pristine floor. The hallway walls were lined with plaques, sports victories, academic trophies, alumni donors. Not a single photo of a black student among them. Not one. Principal Whitmore's office door clicked shut behind them. The room smelled of lemon-scented polish and authority. Books with titles like Leadership in Education and The Culture of Excellence lined the shelves. A diploma from Princeton University hung proudly behind her desk, and a framed photo of her with the governor grinned from the corner credenza. She gestured for Malcolm to sit across from her. "Would you like some water?" she asked with professional cordiality. "No, ma'am." He kept his jacket on. His hands rested on his knees. He didn't slouch, but he didn't puff his chest either. He sat with the posture of a man who had nothing to prove but everything to protect. She folded her hands over her desktop. "Mr. Bryant, I want to begin by saying, your son is one of the most gifted students in this entire district. Malcolm raised an eyebrow, slow and unimpressed. Funny. I've been sitting back there for half an hour and didn't hear his name once. A pause hung between them. Yes, she admitted, and that's exactly why I wanted to speak to you in private. Go on. There's no easy way to put this, so I'll be direct. Xavier doesn't fit neatly into the school's traditional excellence model. Malcolm blinked once. And what model would that be? We're an elite academic institution, she said smoothly. We cater to students with stable support systems, proven pedigree, and community positioning that aligns with our partnerships. Stable support, Malcolm repeated, voice flat. You mean money? I mean parents who have time to be present. Who attend every meeting. Who join the fundraising board. Who speak at our gala dinners. We measure success not only by talent, but by predictability. Xavier scored higher than every one of those kids you just gave awards to. I know. She took a breath. Which is why I'm offering something unusual. Malcolm narrowed his eyes. He didn't trust unusual. Unusual often came at a cost. I want to propose something that bypasses the usual gatekeeping, she said. We have a partnership with Ridgemont Academy, the private institution 2 counties over. It's for gifted students. They offer full scholarships, but they rarely take transfers after freshman year. Xavier qualifies. I'm willing to write a personal letter of recommendation to get him in, if you'll agree. Agree to what? To allow him to go. To trust us with that transition. He'll be commuting. He won't have the same level of oversight from you, but he'll be in a better environment. Malcolm's jaw tightened. Better? More structured. More refined. It's not a place where students have to deal with distractions. The unspoken word rang clear: culture. Malcolm sat still for a long moment. Why now? He finally asked. Why Xavier? Why offer this tonight, and not last year when he was already outperforming your top sophomores? Whitmore's gaze remained steady, though something in her eyes flickered. Because parents like you don't usually make it here. You're here now. That changes the calculation. He almost laughed. So, because I showed up late, I'm now worth talking to. Because you showed up, period. You're the variable we couldn't count before. And if I don't say yes, then Xavier remains at Lincoln Prep. And I can't guarantee that the board won't continue overlooking him. Malcolm leaned forward, voice low. Let me tell you something. My son doesn't need saving. He needs visibility. You're not offering him a gift, you're offering him exile dressed up like opportunity. Whitmore didn't flinch. You're emotional. I'm focused, he snapped. Because my son, despite your statistics and your polished floors, has already proven he belongs. And if the only way you can recognize that is by shipping him off to be groomed for someone else's idea of greatness, then maybe it's your system that's underperforming, not him. A long silence stretched out. Whitmore exhaled slowly. Then what do you want, Mr. Bryant? I want you to say his name. Out there. I want those teachers who smirked at him to put his face on their bulletin boards like they do the others. I want him on every application list he qualifies for. And I want your next announcement to include the word Xavier Bryant is the top student in this school. She stared at him, something shifting slightly behind her gaze, uncertainty, maybe even a sliver of guilt. I'll consider your feedback. No, ma'am, Malcolm said, standing. You'll act on it. Because I won't be late next time. And I won't be quiet. He opened the door, stepping into the hallway where Xavier stood waiting, hands still tucked in his pockets, face blank but alert. We good? Xavier asked. Malcolm nodded. Yeah. She made an offer. But we've got a better plan. What's that? Malcolm glanced down at his son. We make this place see you. Every corner of it. They left the office together, walking past the same rows of polished plaques. For the first time, Malcolm didn't feel like he was trailing behind the system. He felt like he was walking into it, with purpose. But unseen in a back hallway, Miss Clark and Mr. Sheffield stood whispering near the faculty lounge. "He'll make waves," Clark said with a curl of her lip. "Let him," Sheffield muttered. "It'll make his fall more public when it comes." But what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Xavier Bryant wasn't climbing their ladder. He was building his own. And the first step had just been taken. The Monday following the parent-teacher meeting was unusually tense at Lincoln Preparatory Academy. Word of Malcolm Bryant's meeting with Principal Whitmore had spread, not through official channels, of course, but through the murmur of staff lounges and side-eyed glances exchanged in faculty meetings. Something had changed. Something they couldn't quite name, but definitely felt. Xavier walked through the front doors of the school with the quiet focus of someone who had learned to read a room before the room knew he was even in it. Nothing outwardly was different. The same trophies gleamed under their dusty cases. The same portraits of smiling white alumni stared from the walls. But for once, people were looking at him. Not with ridicule, yet, but with a kind of wary attention, as if suddenly realizing the silhouette in the corner had a spotlight trained on it all along. In AP History, Mr. Sheffield avoided eye contact during roll call. In literature, Miss Clark called on Xavier, twice. She even managed a thin smile when he gave a flawless breakdown of, their eyes were watching God without glancing at his notes. During lunch, Xavier sat alone as usual, eating his peanut butter sandwich at the edge of the courtyard. Only this time, he wasn't invisible. Several of his classmates glanced his way as they passed, as though measuring him against rumors. It wasn't long before someone finally broke the silence. "Yo, you really got your dad to yell at Whitmore?" It was Jaden, a junior whose father was a local real estate mogul and who wore his privilege like cologne. Xavier didn't look up. He didn't yell. "That's not what I heard." "Then you heard wrong." Jaden smirked, clearly disappointed that his bait hadn't worked. "Word is, they offered to ship you off to Ridgemont." "Fancy. Guess they figured you didn't belong here, huh?" Xavier's gaze finally lifted, sharp and unwavering. "I belong wherever I stand." Jaden chuckled and walked off, but not without throwing over his shoulder, "We'll see how long that lasts." Meanwhile, in Principal Whitmore's office, the mood was tight. Seated across from her was Mr. Kevin Dobson, the district's curriculum coordinator, and beside him sat Mrs. Raina Lynn, data analytics consultant for the State Department of Education. Their presence wasn't scheduled. Whitmore hadn't expected a visit so soon. "We've run our performance reports," Raina Lynn said, placing a neat stack of papers on the desk. "There's an anomaly worth discussing." "Anomaly?" Whitmore repeated, trying to sound neutral. "We compared Lincoln Prep's recognition metrics to actual academic output from your student body. There's a major gap in acknowledgments given to high-performing students of color, particularly one, Xavier Bryant." Whitmore maintained her expression, but her hands twitched slightly in her lap. Dobson flipped open his folder. "This student has led your school's robotics team to 2 state finals, scored in the 98th percentile in English, and won 3 district essay competitions. Yet, according to our review, he has not received a single school-endorsed nomination for scholarships or recognition programs." "That's surprising," Whitmore offered carefully. "There may have been oversights." "Oversights are when one form is missed," Lynn said pointedly. "This looks more like institutional bias. And it's enough to trigger a review of your school's nomination policies." That landed like a thunderclap. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Whitmore asked, her voice sharper than she intended. "We're suggesting," Dobson replied coolly, "that Lincoln Prep needs to correct its internal culture, or risk losing discretionary grants linked to equity compliance. Which includes your leadership incentive bonus." The room went cold. Whitmore's smile was polite, but now it trembled at the corners. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention. I assure you we will take it seriously." As soon as they left, she picked up her phone and dialed the faculty room. "Tell Mr. Sheffield and Ms. Clark I need to meet them immediately." 30 minutes later, the two teachers arrived, confused but curious. "What's going on?" Clark asked. "Close the door," Whitmore said. "We've got a situation." She laid out the reports. Sheffield's jaw twitched. "They're coming after us over that kid?" That kid asterisk, Whitmore snapped, "may cost us our federal equity funds. Our recognitions board has overlooked him on every level. And now it's all in black and white." Clark shook her head. "He's talented, sure. But he doesn't fit the mold." "Change the mold," Whitmore barked. "We need public course correction. I want his face on the front page of the school newsletter. I want a district nomination filed for the Governor's Youth Leadership Council. And I want him entered for the Civic Scholar program by Friday." Sheffield stared at her. "That's the top spot. We were going to nominate Hayden." "Then Hayden loses," she said coldly. "Xavier wins. Or we all lose." Later that day, during sixth period, Xavier was called to the front office. His classmates turned to look, unsure whether it was detention, trouble, or something more interesting. When he arrived, a secretary greeted him with an unexpected tone of warmth. "Xavier, Principal Whitmore would like to see you." "Don't worry, it's good." He stepped into her office with cautious steps. Whitmore stood with a paper in hand, smiling like a politician. "Xavier, I want to personally congratulate you. Your teachers and I have decided to nominate you for the Governor's Civic Scholar program. It's a prestigious opportunity for rising leaders. There's also a feature in our next newsletter about your accomplishments." He blinked. Once. Twice. "Why now?" he asked flatly. She tilted her head, maintaining her careful smile. "Because excellence deserves recognition." He stared at her a moment longer, then replied with calm precision, "Recognition delayed is recognition denied." Her smile didn't falter. But for the first time, her eyes looked away. "Nonetheless, congratulations." He nodded once and left the room, walking past her plaques, her titles, and her careful staging. As he exited the front office, he spotted his father's truck pulling into the parking lot. Malcolm stepped out, still in work boots, but this time, he wasn't late. "How was today?" he asked as Xavier climbed in. "Interesting." "Good interesting or, watch your back, interesting?" "Both." They pulled off in silence, but something had changed. The system had been forced to flinch. And it wasn't done being challenged. The fight wasn't over. It had only just started. Wednesday morning brought a storm. Not rain, but something heavier, administrative weather. The kind that whispered through staff emails, blew through morning announcements, and shifted the mood of classrooms in ways students couldn't quite name. By the second period, Lincoln Prep's teachers had received a message stamped urgent: "All department heads, report to the committee room at 10:15. Agenda, Equity and Recognition Audit." The message came from Whitmore's office, unsigned, but everyone knew who it came from. In the quiet corner of room 208, Xavier sat in chemistry class, laser-focused. While the teacher droned on about electron shells, his mind wasn't on covalent bonds. It was on the sudden spike in attention, the good kind that made his name a talking point in the teacher lounge, and the dangerous kind that made him a target. He'd received 3 check-ins from teachers this week. That was more than he'd gotten in the last 3 semesters combined. One of them even praised his punctuality in front of the whole class. The same teacher who used to lower his grade for not participating enough. But Xavier didn't trust sudden applause. It rarely came without strings. Meanwhile, in the committee room, an over-polished space usually reserved for PDA fundraisers and staff birthdays, 10 people sat at a long conference table. Principal Whitmore stood at the head, flanked by Mr. Sheffield, Ms. Clark, and Coach Graham. Others from the school board attended remotely, their pixelated faces flickering on a mounted screen. "Let's get to it," Whitmore said briskly. We've been flagged by the district. They've called into question our student recognition practices. Particularly regarding disparities in race, class, and nomination transparency. A few teachers shifted in their seats. Coach Graham crossed his arms. So now we're getting slapped just for selecting our best students. Our supposed best students, said Ms. Harrington, a math teacher who rarely spoke up. Xavier Bryant's stats eclipse most of the students we've propped up. Sheffield scoffed. Stats don't equal leadership. Or polish. He's raw. Raw doesn't mean unworthy, Harrington snapped. He built an autonomous drone program for the STEM fair, and we gave the trophy to a kid who submitted a solar system made of styrofoam and glitter because his dad sponsored the chess team. The room went quiet. Whitmore cleared her throat. Regardless of opinion, the district's watching. Our funding is tied to how we respond. Which means this committee will now review all current student nominations. She turned toward Clark. You submitted Hayden Clark for the Civic Scholar Program? Yes, Clark replied coolly. His essays are eloquent. He speaks well. And Xavier? Clark's lips thinned. His tone can be confrontational. And he doesn't engage with faculty. Harrington slammed her folder shut. Maybe because he's tired of being ignored. Whitmore sighed. We're not here to debate personality. We're here to make a decision. And if we don't nominate Xavier Bryant, it needs to be defensible on paper. Silence fell again. No one could challenge his credentials. His numbers were unshakable. His competition wins, irrefutable. His leadership, though quiet, had made measurable impacts across multiple programs. By 11:10, the vote was unanimous, though grudging from some. Xavier would be the official Civic Scholar nominee. Back in the workshop downtown, Malcolm Bryant's gloves were off, his forearms speckled with welding soot as he took a call from the school's main office during lunch break. This is Malcolm. Mr. Bryant, said the secretary on the other end, voice oddly cheerful. We wanted to inform you that Xavier has officially been nominated for the governor's Civic Scholar Program. There'll be a press photo this Friday. We'd love if you could attend. Malcolm didn't smile. He didn't say thank you. He simply said, I'll be there. That night, at home, Xavier stared at the printed nomination form Whitmore had emailed to him. His name was spelled correctly. Every accomplishment, listed. Even his robotics leadership had been highlighted, though the write-up used vague words like promising initiative instead of award-winning innovation. They're trying, Malcolm said as he sat beside him at the table. They're protecting themselves, Xavier corrected. That's different. You're not wrong. But it still puts you in the room. And once you're in the room, you don't just take space, Xavier finished. You change it. Friday morning came fast. Xavier dressed in a black button-up shirt, no tie, fresh sneakers, and his usual unreadable expression. Malcolm showed up to the school in work boots again, though this time his jacket was pressed, and his hands were clean. In the main lobby, photographers from the district gathered. A cloth banner hung behind the Civic Scholar nominees. Hayden Clark stood stiffly in a navy blazer 2 spots down. When it was Xavier's turn for a solo photo, the student coordinator asked, Would you like your father in the picture? Xavier looked at Malcolm. Then nodded. The photo that would later appear on the school's newsletter showed a black father and son standing shoulder to shoulder, one with soot still under his nails, the other with fire in his eyes. Principal Whitmore watched the flash go off, her smile frozen, wondering if this moment would be remembered as redemption, or reckoning. Because what neither she nor the staff realized was that Xavier's nomination had sparked something beyond their control. The next week, 5 more black students submitted project proposals that had long sat in their notebooks. A girl named Amaya asked for an audience with the science board. A sophomore named Malik entered his first essay competition. And a junior named Tyree uploaded his short film to the school's video channel, one that critiqued the exact system Xavier had just shaken. Lincoln Prep had built itself on silence. But Xavier had spoken. Now others were answering. The committee behind the curtain had pulled the strings for too long. And the curtain was starting to fall. Monday came like any other, but the halls of Lincoln Prep no longer whispered the same quiet. Something had shifted in the undercurrent of the school. Eyes lingered longer. Conversations lowered when Xavier walked past. But not out of ridicule this time. It was recognition. And it was spreading. By mid-morning, Miss Clark's literature class buzzed with energy, but not from her. From the students. Open to page 242, she instructed, her usual stiff composure even stiffer now. We'll be discussing Whitman today. Xavier raised his hand. She paused, unaccustomed to him participating voluntarily. Yes, Xavier. I was wondering if we'd ever be covering any black poets this semester. Langston Hughes, maybe Nikki Giovanni. A hush fell across the room. Clark blinked slowly, recalibrating. This curriculum is designed to meet state benchmarks. State benchmarks include multicultural literature, he replied, calm, clear. It's on the district's approved list. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. We'll look into it, she said, too quickly. Behind Xavier, Amaya raised her hand too. Ms. Clark, I actually brought in a copy of the collected poems of Audre Lorde if you want to borrow it. Students exchanged looks. This wasn't usual. This was bold. Later that day, during lunch, students began gathering in clusters, not for gossip, but for something more deliberate. A group of underclassmen sat with notebooks open, discussing essay submissions. The robotics team table filled with students who had never been invited before. Xavier watched from the corner, silently. He didn't organize it. He hadn't planned any of it. But the energy had multiplied. And that energy was unsettling the people who had gotten too comfortable with control. In the front office, Principal Whitmore stared at her computer screen as she read an email from the superintendent's office. The subject line, Equity Audit, External Oversight Request. Attached was a directive to conduct a third-party review of staff nomination practices, club admission demographics, and disciplinary referrals. It wasn't just one student now. It was policy. And it was about to expose years of carefully buried disparity. By Tuesday, the school newspaper's latest issue hit lockers. On the back page, a student essay titled What Excellence Looks Like When No One's Looking, written by Xavier Bryant. He hadn't even submitted it to the staff. Amaya had. The essay didn't name names, but it didn't need to. It spoke of teachers who saw through certain students. It spoke of silence as a weapon. It spoke of doors left closed unless someone kicked them open. The student body read it like gospel. At the weekly staff meeting, Whitmore was sharper than usual. We have a perception problem, she said, pacing. Students are organizing, and they're doing it without our guidance. That's dangerous. Maybe it's not dangerous, Ms. Harrington offered. Maybe it's overdue. Speak for yourself, Clark muttered. We need to control the narrative, Whitmore continued. Before this turns into a media issue. If the board gets spooked, we lose our autonomy. Mr. Sheffield scoffed. This is what happens when we start caving to emotion instead of standards. No, Harrington said, her voice rising. This is what happens when we ignore black excellence until it forces its way into the light. Silence. Whitmore gathered herself. Fine. Then let's act like we're listening. Schedule an equity listening panel for next week. Let students feel heard. We'll handpick participants, keep it structured, tight. Coach Graham spoke for the first time. What if Xavier's on it? Of course he'll be on it, Whitmore said. Optics demand it. But her tone made it clear. They weren't elevating him. They were containing him. That afternoon, Xavier got the invite in his locker. A neatly typed letter from administration. Dear Xavier Bryant, you've been selected to participate in Lincoln Preparator's first student equity listening panel. We value your voice and would appreciate your insights on improving student inclusion and success. He read the letter twice. Then again. They want to make it look like they're listening, he said to Amaya, handing her the paper. So make them listen for real, she said. Don't be their token. Be their mirror. Friday morning came, and with it, a surprise announcement. Students interested in contributing to the equity panel may submit questions or suggestions through the anonymous submission box in the main lobby. By 11 a.m., the box was full. By 3 p.m., it was overflowing. Inside were questions like, why are all the honor students white except for 2 people? Why does Mr. Sheffield interrupt black students more than white ones? Why are the art show winners always from the same 3 families? The administration had lit a match hoping to control the flame. But the flame had found oxygen. And it was growing. As Xavier walked to his final class that day, he passed by Mr. Sheffield in the hallway. The teacher gave him a glance, half warning, half calculation. Xavier didn't blink. He was no longer playing their game. He was writing new rules. The auditorium hadn't been this full on a Wednesday morning since the district superintendent visited to present the annual Excellence in Education banner, a banner that, of course, only featured the school's top 3 white scholars. But today's assembly wasn't for show. It was for the equity listening panel, and the students knew it wasn't just a symbolic gesture. Not anymore. Xavier sat in the front row, not on stage yet, the paper program folded in his lap. His name was printed second, just below, student speaker, Hayden Clark. Of course. Even in something called equity, they'd slipped in an old habit. Hayden wasn't in the newsletter. Hayden didn't fill the submission box. But he was first at the mic. Keep calm, Xavier muttered to himself, smoothing the crease out of the program. Don't give them a crack to crawl through. Behind him, Amaya leaned in. They're already trying to shape the story. You shape it louder. Principal Whitmore stepped onto the stage at 9:07 a.m. sharp. She wore a sleek navy pantsuit, the kind that said, executive, and carried herself like someone threading a needle in front of an audience. She smiled like a diplomat addressing a mildly annoying protest. Good morning, everyone, she began, her voice carefully tuned. Today is not about defense. It's about listening. Growth. Community. The teachers sat in the back 3 rows, most stiff and silent, some visibly uncomfortable. Parents had been invited too, though notably, only the ones who regularly attended fundraisers and school board dinners had RSVP'd. This panel, Whitmore continued, will be led by some of our brightest young voices. We'll hear their insights and answer a few selected questions submitted by you, the student body. Selected, the word echoed in Xavier's mind. He'd seen the submission box himself. Overflowing. But only a few were selected. Of course. Hayden was called first. He stepped up to the podium, hair perfectly parted, wearing a blue sweater vest, and read from a well-prepared sheet. I believe Lincoln Prep fosters excellence. But we must do better at encouraging diverse participation, he said smoothly. It's not just about giving out awards. It's about making sure everyone feels invited to the table. Polite applause followed. The phrase, invited to the table, felt like a line copied from a college brochure. Whitmore beamed like it was exactly the tone she'd hoped for. Then they called Xavier. He stood without rush, walked to the mic, and looked out, not at Whitmore or the board, but at the students. The ones who had started speaking up. The ones who had slipped anonymous questions into that submission box. His people. No paper. Whitmore said, just audible enough through her mic. No, Xavier replied into his. I don't need one. Silence. I wasn't invited to the table. I brought my own chair. A few students straightened in their seats. A few parents whispered. For years, this school has made success something you're allowed to reach, if you play quiet, play along, and play small. But let's be clear, we've been succeeding without your spotlight. We've been building in the shadows. Winning competitions that got buried in footnotes. Writing essays that went unmentioned. Painting murals without our names signed. He scanned the auditorium. Whitmore looked composed, but her grip on the armrest tightened. You say you're listening. Then here's what you need to hear: equity isn't a panel. It's policy. It's recognition without condition. It's teachers who stop treating us like exceptions. It's counselors who recommend us for real programs, not the soft alternatives. A few students clapped. One teacher, Ms. Harrington, did too. And one more thing, Xavier added. Those anonymous questions. I read them. Even if you didn't choose to display them all. He pulled a folded sheet from his pocket and opened it. Here's one that didn't make it past the filter, asterisk, why does Lincoln Prep pretend it's a meritocracy when everyone already knows whose parents donate the most? Asterisk gasps. Whitmore rose quickly. Xavier, I'm not finished. She froze. Those questions matter. They're not noise. They're truth. So either this school starts acknowledging all the excellence in this building, or we'll keep bringing our own tables, our own chairs, and our own spotlight. Thunderous applause. The kind that starts hesitant but builds, cresting like a wave breaking against stone. Students stood. Even some parents clapped, though others sat in cold silence. Xavier stepped down and returned to his seat. Amaya gave him a quiet fist bump. Whitmore returned to the mic. Her face professional, but pale. Thank you. Xavier. That was powerful. She moved quickly into the structured Q&A, cherry-picked and mild. One asked about inclusive sports tryouts. Another about celebrating cultural holidays. Harmless. Manageable. But the tone had already changed. The control was gone. The audience belonged to someone else now. After the panel, Xavier was approached by Ms. Harrington outside the auditorium. Just wanted to say. I've been here 20 years, she said. And that was the most honest thing I've ever heard on that stage. He nodded. Thank you, ma'am. She hesitated. They're not done. Just be careful. When institutions get embarrassed, they try to correct with silence. I'm not afraid of silence, he replied. I know how to fill it. That evening, Xavier sat with Malcolm on the front porch, laptop open, inbox full. Student messages. Local blog writers. Even a district alumni group asking for an interview. You started something. Malcolm said, sipping black coffee from a chipped mug. No, Xavier said, eyes scanning the screen. We started something. They just didn't see it until now. You ready for what comes next? Xavier looked up. The sun was low behind the rooftops. The world was quiet, but watching. Yeah, he said. Now it's their turn to answer. The next morning, Lincoln Prep's online portal had a new pop-up, reminder, equity efforts must be constructive. Disruptive or inflammatory behavior may result in disciplinary review. No one said Xavier's name. They didn't need to. Everyone knew who the warning was for. By 8:15 a.m., he'd already received 2 strange interactions. The first came from Coach Graham, who greeted him with a forced, "Morning, Bryant," before casually mentioning, "Your robotics team's locker needs clearing. We're reallocating the space to varsity gear." Xavier blinked. Reallocating? That's been our space for 3 years. Yeah, well, space is tight, Coach said, not meeting his eyes. Board's decision. The second came in Algebra 2, when Mr. Kemp handed back a quiz Xavier had aced but marked him off 5 points for notation inconsistencies. This isn't how you usually grade, Xavier said, calm but pointed. Standards are being enforced more rigorously, Kemp replied, before adding, you of all people should appreciate consistency. There it was. The retaliation. Small enough to appear reasonable. Large enough to slow someone down. He wasn't surprised. But he was disappointed. After school, Xavier found Amaya and Malik in the computer lab. They're tightening the screws, he said. I got pulled into the counselor's office this morning, Malik said. Asked me if I felt pressured by peer activism. Told them I felt pressured by racism. They didn't write that part down. They're not used to students setting the pace, Amaya said. So now they're trying to trip us into making mistakes. Xavier pulled out his phone and scrolled through the dozens of DMs he'd gotten. Other black students. Latine students. Some Asian and first-gen kids too. All telling the same story, they were finally being seen, and suddenly being disciplined more. Patterns. Clear ones. I've got an idea, Xavier said slowly, but I need time. And I need help. What kind of help? Amaya asked. Digital. Visual. Documentation. If they're going to pretend nothing's happening, we give them proof they can't scrub. That night, in Malcolm's garage, Xavier and his father sat shoulder to shoulder at the workbench. Sparks hissed in the background from a side project Malcolm had left unfinished. They're coming sideways now, Xavier said, eyes glued to the screen as he compiled reports. Can't hit me in the open, so they hit everything around me. That's how systems defend themselves, Malcolm replied. Not with truth. With erosion. Xavier looked at his father, the man who'd spent most of his life working in the background. Always useful. Rarely acknowledged. You ever think about walking away? He asked. Every damn day, Malcolm said. But I don't. Not because I like pain. Because the second you stop, they win by default. The next day, Xavier launched the Lincoln Unmasked project. A simple website. No school branding. No names. Just anonymous stories, screenshots, grade inconsistencies, club rejection emails, and nomination records, all submitted by students. Verified. Documented. Undeniable. Within 48 hours, it had 3,000 views. The district superintendent saw it. A state journalist picked it up. Whitmore called an emergency staff meeting. This is an orchestrated smear, she said, voice clipped. We cannot allow a few students to damage our institution's reputation. I want staff reviewing all postings. We'll find violations. Cyberbullying. Slander. Anything we can use. Ms. Clark raised her hand. Should we involve legal? Not yet. That would escalate it. We contain first. We discredit second. Meanwhile, the students were 10 steps ahead. Amaya began releasing anonymous video interviews, students in silhouette, voices digitally altered. One girl spoke of being excluded from the Science Expo after she'd won 2 county fairs. Another described how her film was pulled from the school site for being too political. Each clip ended the same way, we are not exceptions. We are evidence. In the halls, teachers grew visibly tense. Sheffield snapped at a freshman for asking about peer mentoring. Clark began regrading papers more harshly, particularly for students linked to Xavier's circle. Whitmore sent an email to parents calling for civility and return to academic focus. She offered to host a unity night with food trucks and open dialogue. But no one was buying it. Unity wasn't the issue. Accountability was. That Friday, Xavier received a summons to Whitmore's office. He walked in without fear, just a USB drive in his pocket and clarity in his mind. She sat behind her desk like a judge, hands folded, expression unreadable. You're becoming a liability, she said without preamble. What started as a student voice is now institutional sabotage. I'm just showing what already existed, Xavier said. You're reacting like someone who thought no one would ever look behind the curtain. She leaned forward. You want me to say the system failed you? I'll say it, yes, it did. But this campaign. This undermines trust. No, he replied. This builds it. But not in you. In us. She exhaled slowly. I'm offering you a choice. End this campaign. Let the equity panel issue its report. Let us rebuild from the inside. Or we initiate a disciplinary review for conduct violation. You're not untouchable, Xavier. He stared at her a long moment. Then calmly took the USB drive from his pocket, set it on her desk. What's this? Every email, rubric discrepancy, and student rejection you thought we wouldn't track. Submit your review. We'll submit ours. Let the district decide. She stared at the device like it was a live wire. I came here to learn, Xavier added. Turns out I'm teaching. He stood, turned, and walked out. Behind him, the principal sat frozen, realizing that for the first time in her career, she wasn't the one holding the gradebook. The students were. And the final score hadn't even been tallied yet. Monday morning, Lincoln Prep was unusually silent. No morning announcements. No cheerful bell music. Just tension, thick, metallic, like the air before a storm. By 8:45 a.m., every classroom projector had defaulted to a paused video screen. No one knew who triggered it. Teachers scrambled to reset their boards. But they couldn't. The school's internal server had been overridden, not by a hack, but by a scheduling link submitted through the official teacher content portal. At exactly 9 a.m., the video played. Across every screen. A student's voice, anonymous, crackled over a black background. Greater than, we didn't start this to go viral. We started this because silence was making us invisible. Cut to a blurred hallway. Students of color blurred, voices altered, giving first-hand accounts, greater than, I applied to the Honors Council 3 times. They told me they lost my paperwork, greater than, my mural was repainted before the parents' gala. They said it was too urban, greater than, they let me win the science fair in 10th grade, but told me to tone down the afro for press day. One teacher tried pulling the projector's plug. The video still played. The file had been downloaded to every device. Synced, scheduled, inescapable. Greater than, this isn't about revenge. This is about revision. You can't teach us about justice and then punish us for asking why we don't see it here. By the end of the 3-minute video, the auditorium was full. Whitmore, red-faced, stood behind the podium as teachers filed in. The students had already taken their seats. Not because they'd been asked to, but because they had planned to. Xavier stepped onto the stage without permission. No cue card. No escort. Just purpose. Good morning, he said. His voice didn't need a mic. The room fell silent. This is the day Lincoln Prep gets redefined. Not by brochures. Not by banners. By truth. He gestured to the screen behind him. You've now heard the stories. Now you'll see the numbers. Amaya, from the AV booth, launched a new slideshow. Side-by-side comparisons, honor roll names, segmented by race. Club president lists for the past 5 years. Nomination records. Disciplinary actions, color-coded. The disparities weren't subtle. They were blinding. Gasps rose from the crowd. Teachers sat stiff, jaws clenched. Whitmore stood frozen behind Xavier, unsure whether to step in, or step down. Xavier turned back to the crowd. This isn't just a Lincoln Prep problem. This is a system problem. But it ends here. Now. We're not asking for representation anymore. We're demanding access. He looked straight at Whitmore. You said I was becoming a liability. I'm not the problem. The data is. Before she could respond, a new voice rose. I second that. It was Ms. Harrington. She stood from the second row of faculty seating. And I've got 10 years' worth of ignored proposals and student project rejections that back him up. Then came another. Malik, from the robotics team. And I have an email trail where we were told our budget was cut, while the fencing team got new uniforms. More hands rose. Not just students. Parents. A few staff. Even 2 teachers who'd stayed quiet for years. The auditorium had become a courtroom. But the verdict wasn't against Xavier. It was against the institution that had tried to suppress him. Whitmore raised her hand, finally stepping forward. Her voice shook, not from fear, but from a realization she could no longer outrun. I hear you. Xavier raised his brow. Do you? She nodded, jaw tight. You want change. Then let's formalize it. A murmur spread. Xavier didn't flinch. Change doesn't start with meetings. It starts with commitments. So here's what we want. He produced a printed list, 5 demands. 1. An immediate audit of all honors and nominations from the last 5 years. 2. Revised criteria for club leadership, with oversight from a student-elected equity board. 3. Transparency in discipline logs and faculty evaluation metrics. 4. Implementation of a Black Studies elective, with student co-design input. 5. Permanent recognition of underrepresented student contributions in the school's annual report. Whitmore took the list. She didn't smile. But she didn't tear it up either. We'll respond by the end of the week. Xavier stared her down. We'll hold you to that. When the bell rang, no one moved. Until Xavier stepped down. Then they followed. A wave of students, black, brown, first-gen, quiet achievers, walking out of the auditorium with their heads high. Whitmore remained behind, still clutching the list. The walls of her institution, the ones built on unspoken bias and polished exclusion, had finally spoken. And they hadn't spoken for her. They had spoken for truth. That night, the local news ran a headline, Students' Equity Revolt Forces Historic Shift at Lincoln Prep. But Xavier didn't care about headlines. He cared about the fact that he could finally breathe in those halls. Not as a shadow. But as the blueprint. Thursday. 1 week since the panel. 3 days since the data video. Less than 24 hours before Whitmore's promised response. By now, Lincoln Unmasked had gone statewide. Xavier hadn't meant for it to spread that far, but once truth leaves the cage, it doesn't ask for permission. State board representatives were already scheduled for an impromptu campus visit next week. The district equity officer was on standby. And students from 3 other prep schools had emailed Xavier asking for advice on launching similar platforms of their own. But that wasn't what weighed on him as he stood at the curb in front of Lincoln Prep that morning. It was the envelope Malcolm had slid across the dinner table the night before. An offer. From the Ridgemont Academy. A full scholarship. Personal letter of recommendation. Room in their advanced engineering track. All packaged neatly with words like inclusive, transformative, and merit-based. He hadn't said yes. He hadn't said no. He'd left it in his bag. Because now, it wasn't just about what was best for him. It was about what happened to every other kid who didn't get an envelope. The ones still invisible. Still unheard. He entered school without fanfare. No raised fists. No chants. Just calm gravity. Like someone who'd lit a fire and now watched what the smoke would reveal. At 11:17 a.m., Whitmore's email hit every inbox on campus. Subject, Response to Equity Proposal, Lincoln Prep Administrative Report. Students opened it with shaky fingers. Teachers with guarded eyes. It was 7 pages long. But page 1 said everything. The administration of Lincoln Preparatory Academy acknowledges that significant disparities have existed in our recognition, discipline, and program nomination practices. We accept the data submitted by the Student Equity Coalition as valid and actionable. It was real. The school was admitting it. Effective immediately. 1. A full internal audit will be conducted in partnership with the State Equity Task Force. 2. All nominations for scholarships and programs will go through a blind evaluation process. 3. A Student Equity Board, elected by peers, will have a seat in all major policy review meetings. 4. Faculty will undergo annual anti-bias training, with performance tied to equity benchmarks. 5. A course titled The Voice is Unheard, Black Studies and Social Change will begin development this semester, co-led by staff and students. Xavier read every word twice. He didn't smile. He didn't cry. He breathed deeply. He met Amaya and Malik by the courtyard. Neither had seen the full report yet. He handed them his phone. They scrolled. Blinked. Then sat, stunned. They actually admitted it, Amaya whispered. All of it. They had no choice, Xavier replied. But admission isn't transformation. That part's still on us. Around them, word spread like electricity. Teachers emerged from classrooms looking winded. Some looked relieved. Others, exposed. Ms. Harrington approached quietly. I read the report. You did it. No, Xavier said. We did it. And it's just the beginning. You know they're going to keep testing you, she warned. They'll smile in public. But behind closed doors. He nodded. Then we make sure those doors stay open. That afternoon, the school hosted an open forum in the auditorium. This time, it wasn't performative. Whitmore took the stage, not as the authority, but as a messenger. We failed you, she began. We failed many of you. And we will spend every year forward earning the right to teach you again. There was no applause. Just silence. Not cold. Not angry. Measuring, students lined up at the mic. They asked real questions. About representation. About safety. About retaliation. And they asked what consequences the faculty responsible would face. Whitmore didn't dodge. Some have been removed from their roles. Some are under review. None of this will be hidden. The wall of silence that had protected comfort for so long was cracking. When Xavier finally approached the mic, the room held its breath. I accept your apology, he said slowly, but I won't mistake it for a fix. He paused. You admitted the system was broken. Now let's rebuild it where every student sees themselves not just in your slideshows, but in your decision-making. This time, the applause wasn't performative. It came from the gut. Outside, Xavier found Malcolm waiting in his truck. The sun was setting behind the school, casting it in a soft orange hue, like the day was trying to cleanse itself. You read the email? Xavier asked. Read it twice, Malcolm said, lighting a cigarette he wouldn't finish. You made the mountain move. Xavier pulled the Ridgemont envelope from his bag and handed it over. Malcolm held it, surprised. You sure? Xavier nodded. If I leave now, it all fades back. I don't want to be the only name they fix. I want to make sure I'm not the last one they see. Malcolm didn't press him. He didn't need to. His eyes said it all. Pride. Not for the fight. But for the choice to stay in it. That night, the website Lincoln Unmasked updated with a single line across the top, Phase 1 complete. Now we build. Because this wasn't a protest anymore. It was a blueprint. And Xavier Bryant wasn't just a student. He was the architect. 6 months later, Lincoln Prep looked the same from the outside: red brick, polished windows, manicured hedges, but the inside told a different story. The hallways buzzed not with gossip, but with initiative. The walls, once bare except for trophy cases filled with names few could relate to, now displayed rotating student artwork, essays, and science projects, each with names clearly labeled, no more anonymity for excellence. The Student Equity Board met every Wednesday in room 304. 10 members, elected by their peers. A teacher liaison sat in, but never spoke unless asked. They reviewed curriculum suggestions, club funding requests, and bias reports submitted anonymously. The board had teeth. And it had Xavier Bryant at the head. He hadn't taken the Ridgemont offer. Not out of spite. Out of strategy. He didn't need to leave to be great, he only needed the room to prove that greatness already lived here. One by one, others followed. Malik, now vice president of the robotics team, ran a Saturday coding camp for Black and Latine middle schoolers. Amaya launched the school's first cultural magazine, Uncensored, featuring student writers of color and those whose voices had long been quieted. Faculty changed too. Ms. Clark had transitioned to another institution. Mr. Sheffield quietly retired after the district's internal review turned up too many unsubstantiated anomalies. In their place, new voices arrived. Teachers who didn't flinch at criticism. Who asked students what they wanted to learn, not just what the test required. Ms. Harrington stayed, now promoted to Dean of Academic Inclusion. Her door remained open, literally and metaphorically. The Black Studies elective, the Voices Unheard was now one of the most popular courses in the school. Students sat on windowsills when seats filled. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever is. Some teachers still whispered about the pendulum swinging too far. A few parents transferred their children to other prep schools, with more tradition. But they were no longer the dominant voice. One Friday afternoon, as the school prepared for its first Equity Award ceremony, Xavier stood on the auditorium stage helping arrange chairs. No suit. No fanfare. Just jeans and a t-shirt that read, "We are the system now." Principal Whitmore entered quietly. She walked with more humility these days. Not broken, but reshaped. "Bryant," she said softly. "You have a minute?" He nodded. "I wanted to let you know, the district asked me to present at the State Leadership Summit. About Lincoln Prep's turnaround." He tilted his head. "You gonna tell them the truth?" She exhaled. "That it started because a student forced our hand?" "Yes. I will." He studied her for a long beat. Then offered a nod. Not approval. Acknowledgement. "You've earned that, Mike," she said. "This place, it's changed." He didn't smile. "It's still changing. But now it's on purpose." As the auditorium filled, students of every background streamed in, students who used to sit on the margins, now carrying clipboards, project posters, and camera gear. Malik ran the live stream. Amaya prepped backstage with student presenters. A sixth grader from the feeder middle school rehearsed his speech for Most Promising Community Project. When Xavier stepped to the mic to open the ceremony, the room hushed. He didn't thank administrators. He didn't pat himself on the back. He said what mattered. 6 months ago, some people in this building thought equity meant charity. Now they know, it means accountability. This isn't the end of the work. It's the blueprint. And every student in this room is a builder. Thunderous applause followed. Not because they were told to clap. Because they believed it. After the ceremony, as the sun dropped low over the parking lot, Malcolm Bryant waited outside in the same truck. Xavier walked out, folder in hand, steps calm, back straight. His father nodded. "How'd it go?" "We filled the room," Xavier said. "For the right reasons this time." Malcolm smiled, a small, proud smile reserved only for moments that mattered. "You ever think about running for office?" "I already did," Xavier said, sliding into the passenger seat. This was my campaign. The truck pulled away from Lincoln Prep, not in defeat, not in escape, but as part of something ongoing. Something earned, and as they drove into the horizon, the lights in the school stayed on a little later than usual. Because the legacy of that one late-arriving black dad and his so-called angry son hadn't just shaken a school. They'd redefined it. Forever. Every student deserves to be seen. Every voice, heard. No child should have to fight for recognition in a place meant to uplift them. This story isn't just powerful, it's real for too many. Let it be a mirror, a message, and a movement. Whether you're a parent, teacher, or student, your presence can change the room. If this story moved you, made you think, or opened your eyes even just a little, like this video, share it, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that challenge, empower, and inspire change. Because silence protects systems. But your voice, that rewrites them. Let's keep building that better future, together.